Good afternoon. Now we convene our strategy and finance committee meeting on the 1st of August. Sorry. So we've just had a readjustment. The submitter, for whatever reason, that was scheduled on the interim speed management plan for 1:45 is a mix up. So we've given the opportunity, if they still wish to take that up, to come back at the end of this hearing, which we're going to embark on, which is the Waterloo Park land exchange. So that's tentative. This is an update. So we may have that, we may not. So there's an update on that situation. So for submitters, thank you for bringing in your submissions in written form. Please take them as being read and feel free to speak to your submissions with any additional information or key points. You'll get allocated 10 minutes, and that does include the opportunity for elected members to ask questions. So if you want to allow time for that, please take that into consideration. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on our live stream through the Council's YouTube channel. And we covered the health and safety at the beginning of the meeting, but essentially if there is an emergency, please just follow our administrators and head to the clock tower in Te Marae Ine Square. There's our meeting point, and we can be very further on that unfortunate and unlikely emergency is required. So we'll move into the hearing, and yes, I've got to move two recommendations before us to move to that stage, which those the committee resolves at the Strategy and Finance Committee hearings. There's submissions from presenters who indicated they wish to be heard in support of their submission, and two, the committee note procedures of the hearing submissions as described in the procedure sheet. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Naylor, and invite a vote. For those in the gallery, we're just the first day of new technology, and so we're just giving some space and grace as far as teething issues, and so please allow a little extra time. Change to the speaker. Yeah, I'm going to do this on show of hands. All those in favour, say aye and just raise your hands. Against, that's unanimous, and that's passed unanimously. Not mentioned the number of votes. 11 votes for. So that moves us into our list of submitters. There will be a rearranging just on availability and a request with other commitments afterwards. While this is a formal hearing, I want you to feel relaxed, and I had a request if somebody could stand. That's absolutely fine. As I mentioned, 10 minutes is allocated per speaking slot. Our first submitter, which is outside of our run sheet, I'm going to call on Jacqueline Carr, submitter number 28, to come and speak to the first submission first before we run through the ballot as was advertised.
lower this a bit. Challenge people.
Right, the floor is yours.
Okay, this is a very short notice because I couldn't find my actual written submission, and I thought I was coming tomorrow, but I discovered late last night that it's this afternoon, and I have groundhog duties at 3 o'clock, so bear with. I live not far away from Roxborough Crescent. I also take my dog, used to take my dog for a walk before he had, along there. With Forest and Bird, I planted trees not that far away from Roxborough Crescent. I have often sputtered with the air pollution from pigeons, so I'm quite happy to see them go, quite frankly. But I am concerned that the reserve land was put there as a buffer, and we need to retain green space. Most places in the world are actually planting trees and retaining green space. And with the proximity of that housing development to the present flood bank, and given the climate change that has occurred and will continue to occur and get worse unless we do something about it, is it a good idea to cram in as many houses as possible and possibly increase the risk of flooding, given that concrete does not absorb water and the runoff will be greater? That strip of land, it may just be a small strip of land, but it is important. There's already trees there. It could link up with other tree areas and people's gardens. The importance of trees worldwide has been well documented. They're important to reduce the likelihood of excessive heat and excessive cold and wind. We're used to the wind and the rain here, but the heat will come, no doubt. I wonder how many of those houses that are going to be built, and I don't know the details, will be passive houses. I wonder how many of them will have even a small area in which they're eligible to grow their own vegetables and fruit. We could actually plant fruit trees and some native trees in that buffer zone, and it would be of aesthetic value and a value to the earth and a value to people. Let's get back down to the basics. What do we need? We need fresh air, we need food, we need shelter. We don't want to be too hot, we don't want to be too cold. And how many of those houses are going to be first-time buyers? How many are going to be multi-million-dollar properties adjacent to the river, which is what a lot of property developers have included quite a lot of. We're running out of time. We're supposed to be an eco-city. Our piece of paper claiming that we are allowed to go to a public meeting around 3 days after the event. It may be the mayor's fault, but the public consultation on this has been lacking. I'd like to take a minute for people to think about how much we kowtow to property developers at the expense of people. I'd like to say that people are more important than profit, but actually more important than people is the land and the earth. I speak as an ecologist, somebody who's worked for the Water Authority, somebody with an MSc in Environmental Resources. I know what I'm talking about. In the mid-70s, we knew there was going to be a problem if we messed up the earth and the climate that we have done. I think we need to think more in terms of cycles, hexagonal patterns rather than a grid system, this American-style suburban grid system, which is it's more car orientated and road orientated than people and community orientated. We need to retain bumping into spaces, community spaces, as much as possible. It's all very well producing glossy magazines that show the river as some sort of blue. But I've never seen the river blue, personally. You know, let's have a reality check. It's polluted, and we don't want to be a tourist centre for God knows who. It's not very nice, and you've done really well with the stormwater drainage and all that. Although guessing where the roadworks are going to be next is becoming quite a novel game when you're driving. So that's me.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm going to open it up for members if there are any questions. Perhaps I just might was prompted by your public consultation saying that it was lacking. I just understand the point that you say that you had only received notification for it and had 3 days notice to respond. Is that what I understood?
We got a letter through the post 3 days after the first public consultation meeting in the Scout Hut, which is alongside Roxburgh and Waterloo.
Okay.
So we couldn't go to that. And to be honest, the little maps that were put up on the bus shelters and things, I mean, I did geography and I was struggling to walk around and find exactly what was going to go where, you know. I think the reserve land has become a car park.
Okay.
Concrete does not absorb water.
Thank you for clarifying that. There's no other members that have questions. So thank you very much for your submission and being here today to speak to it.
Thank you very much.
That moves us on to our next presenter, Shelley Windley Lewis. Welcome. Your name, Dimitri? Welcome.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say a few brief points in addition to my submission, and then let anyone here ask. So thank you very much for offering to allow people to come and speak to these submissions. I'm not a resident of Tilbury Avenue. I don't live in that part of Whakaturu. I do live in another part of Whakaturu, and our property borders a reserve. And so it is with some horror that we enjoy our property right next to a reserve and think that perhaps one day our reserve that's on our boundary may come up for a changing purpose. When we moved next to the reserve, and this is the second property where we've been quite close to reserves, we could anticipate that perhaps a green space might change in nature. You know, maybe it's grass and next year there'll be trees, or maybe there are no buildings on it and perhaps there'll be some sort of infrastructure put on it that doesn't prevent the continued use of that and enjoyment of that green space. You know, it's almost implied when you live near these places that these places are going to stay as they are. Like, I don't feel like that with private property. If I moved next to an empty section, I have no assumption that that section is going to remain empty, or that the buildings that are on it will stay the shape they are, the size they are. The people in it will move and come and go. You know, the purposes of a private property or residential in a residential area, or indeed if I move next to a commercial area, I've got no expectation that that isn't going to change. But as a resident of somebody that lives next to green space, I totally believe that that green space will be retained by the city, that I won't lose the ability that I have right now of enjoying that green space. So I think perhaps I come from a slightly different point of view to these guys, because I don't have that proximity to that particular piece of land. But I'm quite concerned about the planners thinking that they can move and pick up and move and change it in purpose, green space in the city. Second aspect to that in my mind is that how do the planners possibly weigh up the rights of some residents, there'll be residents, and tenants or owners, with the, which is perhaps these guys that live near that. How can they decide that their ability to use and enjoy that green space that they have moved into with full purpose, moved adjacent to, that they can rob those residents of that ability to enjoy that green space and give it to another group of residents, several, in this case, in the new Roxburgh area. I don't understand how how the planners or the council or whoever makes these decisions can possibly weigh my rights to enjoy it if I live adjacent to it up against potential new landowners. I don't understand how that balancing act can occur. I don't think it should occur, but I don't understand how it could possibly occur, why certain residents their rights should be valued more than others. Question how that can happen, and I would, really need to understand how possibly any sort of sense of fairness could be achieved by taking away some people's rights and just handing them over to somebody else. The second point I wanted to raise was just as I wrote that in the planner's description of the green space near Tilbury, the Tilbury Avenue green space, it only describes it as a buffer zone. And we all know when we look at a piece of green space, I think of it quite differently to what all of you guys do. The planners absolutely know that green space is more than one purpose. It is not just a buffer between the factory or whatever it was there and the houses. We all see and enjoy green space. And in today's world, we enjoy it in a way that it was never considered, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Just the openness, just the quietness of it, just the ability to be in a space where you're not going to be run over by a car, or there's not the same activity and buzz and people in it that there are down a footpath or in a street or in a shopping complex, in a library or a museum or anything. The green spaces, we all get different benefits from, and the suggestion that there's really only one purpose for it, and now that these commercial activities are going to go, then that makes this place redundant, is really misleading. And I don't understand that they could have put that in without having some sort of intention to perhaps mislead, because we all know that there's more than one purpose for green space, excuse me. And just the third thing is, as I wrote, the motivation for moving the green space away from, taking green space away and reallocating it, as they describe it, is to create a housing development adjacent to the river. And I'm sure we all watched, earlier in the year with the floods in Auckland and the cyclone, just at the horror of people fleeing for their life because water systems stormwater systems hadn't operated as everyone had hoped for, and water that was supposedly happily going to be going underground during heavy rain periods didn't stay underground, and it popped up and it came into places where it shouldn't have come to. And I understand a lot of the planning going on in Auckland now is to think about how they overland a lot of the waterways that have are at the moment and have historically been undergrounded, to overland them so that there is somewhere for this water to go. And we all know this water is coming. And in this potential development, the water is at the river and rainwater that is going to be, coming into all of us, around all of us. We're all going to see more of this, no doubt. And so green space that we've got, I imagine we're all thinking that that's going to help us deal with the additional water that is coming. And so to move away from retaining everything we've got now, again, it seems to be not as well thought out as it could be, and certainly to lose a bit of green space so that we can put it yet more housing. Put a lot of housing already near waterways. To put more housing near waterways that we're going to then have to protect doesn't seem to be a sound basis to make for a sound housing development decision for a start. It certainly doesn't seem to be a sensible basis to remove green space from our city. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great, thank you. We do have a question from Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Shelley, for speaking to your submission. A couple of questions. Your final points around the kind of broader concerns around building close to rivers. You referenced the recent cyclones. Would you say that your view has kind of shifted on that in recent times? Is that kind of something that was really triggered by that, or is that kind of a long-standing view and concern that you had?
In terms of removing green space?
In terms of kind of the building very close to rivers.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I think so we've been here at 15 years and we have seen the river, because we've lived closest to the river, we've seen the river come up high twice since we've actually been here. And, it's scary sort of stuff. We understand that happens. I think what hit us when we watched on the telly what happened in Auckland and with the cyclone was just with all the thought and planning and care in the world that no doubt had gone on in all the housing developments that we all saw water flow through and people fleeing for their lives from, it's just so terrifying now to see that. And I think perhaps if we hadn't seen it, we would not be as impacted as we are now. It seems, I think I probably wouldn't have said 6 months ago, it seems wholly foolish to create another housing development. I wasn't aware of this housing development until, the last couple of months. So, but I'm fairly confident I would not have thought it was foolish. I'd still be here saying I don't want to lose the green space. Mm. But it feels now like it's a foolish thing to be considering when it already looks like all the properties that we have now on edges of rivers or in flood zones are going to need some sort of protection. So there's going to be costs associated with that and effort and resource. And so why would we can do more of that? Put ourselves in that.
Great, thank you for that explanation. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. That does conclude our time for your presentation. Thank you very much, Shelley. Next presentation, we have Rosemary Watson.
Before I start, I'd just like to actually present this to the city from the Tilbury Air Place community. This is locally grown in our gardens. It shows we can do it. We have the will to do it, and we have the vision. Before I actually start talking, I'm going to pour myself a glass of water. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Rosemary Watson of 27 Tilbury Avenue, next to the reserve in Waterloo Park, the subject of this land exchange proposal. You may remember me from my previous public comment on this matter. I oppose the proposed exchange of reserve land, and my written submission explains that more than I can do here. I've heard rumours of residential development in the Roxburgh Crescent industrial zone for years and support the general concept of appropriate housing in that area. But when the plan change was announced last year, it was a huge surprise to discover that reserve exchange was part of that plan. I thought that a reserve was just that, reserved. For whatever reason, it was designated as such. The Waterloo Park Reserve is a local green space recreational reserve. But the Reserves Act 1977 does allow for changes, as long as the land acquiring reserve status is used for the same objectives and purposes as the land given up. Council officers have advised that a local reserve was not deemed necessary in the Roxburgh development, and the original exchange proposal report makes no mention of a local reserve there either. The report does, however, mention several times that the proposed new recreational reserve is intended to enhance and support the Manawatu River Park and access to it. Since the river park is a citywide asset and the proposed reserve is to include increased road width and car parking for visitors to the river from outside the immediate neighbourhood, it surely classes as a citywide destination reserve and not a local reserve. Neither is it like for like with the existing reserve in green space terms. So with these different objectives and characteristics, does the proposed exchange actually meet the requirements for the Reserves Act legislation? Seems to me that it does not. The current reserve is labelled by Council as a buffer strip between industrial and residential areas. The exchange proposal contends that the buffer role would no longer be required if the plan change goes ahead, and appears not to adequately acknowledge all the other inherent values of this green space to the current community. The district plan does, however, recognise the effects that new subdivision and residential development have on the character and amenity values of existing communities, and notes the importance of striving for the best possible outcomes for the neighbourhood as a whole. It also recognises various resource management issues associated with new developments in existing areas and includes policies to mitigate some of those issues. Thus, the Council's good intentions to not diminish the quality of life for a current neighbourhood whilst building a new community are there. And yet, that diminution is just what seems to be happening here. The bespoke rules proposed for the Roxburgh area allow the developers to build up to 11 metres site-wide on small sections, and I haven't come across anything to suggest that the public pre-consultation has altered this. Tilbury Avenue lies at the south end of the Roxburgh site. Without the current reserve and without resource consent and neighbour notification requirements, a row of 3-storey buildings could well be sited just 1 metre away from the northern boundaries of Tilbury Avenue homes, with huge impacts on sunlight, overshadowing, overlooking, privacy, noise, etc. Definitely a reduced quality of life. Plus, of course, the loss of the green space outlook, access, trees, wildlife, and other amenity values of the reserve itself. The best protection against amenity loss and consequent reduction in property values that the Council can actually offer to Tilbury Avenue residents is to retain the existing reserve. And if that stance makes me appear NIMBY, so be it. But surely it's natural and valid that community members have opinions on what is happening, both good and bad, in their community. When one takes action against other issues seen as negative, littering, safety hazards, etc., That's viewed as positive engagement and involvement. So I suggest that IMBY is actually more appropriate, in my backyard. It's about concern for my area, having a sense of pride in it, which is surely better than not caring and apathy. And that's why, with similarly invested neighbours, I'm promoting an alternate vision for our community. The main stated aims for a local recreational reserve are to break up the urban environment and provide for passive recreation. Retaining the current reserve as a buffer between existing housing and the new Roxburgh development absolutely achieves the first of those, especially when also considering the future housing intensification on the other side of Tilbury Avenue and in Eyre Place through Kayangaora redevelopments. It will be the green lungs of a large new body of concrete. But while valued by locals, the current reserve isn't as well used as it could be. The Roxburgh development offers the opportunity to address this, to open up the current dead end of the buffer strip into the new housing area so that it could become a through route for pedestrians, part of another neighbourhood walking option, linking Ruahine Street to the river access beside the Scout Hall in Eyre Place. Thus, the access issue, which was once a barrier to using the end of Waterloo Park for community food, is addressed. And so earlier area ideas about this are being revived and investigated further. The current idea is a community orchard similar to that at Angamati Park in Awapuni. What better way for both existing and new residents and visitors to further enhance the public use and enjoyment of the new through route reserve area and the quality of the green space itself, and to plant suitable trees and shrubs that will contribute to community food security. Council literature states several benefits to residents of planting fruit and nut trees in parks. These are bringing communities together, providing a nutritious food supply, contributing to an eco-friendly city, promoting community well-being, strengthening community connections and interactions, and providing educational resources for children. I didn't see that until recently. It's part of the Fruit Tree Guardians Community Orchards project, where PNCC is planting fruit and nut trees in various locations around the city, with community groups or dedicated neighbours prepared to take care of them. But please look at my submissions to date. Different words may be, but the vision is the same. With the Hokifitu Scouts as guardians, Council has recently planted some fruit trees near the Scout Hall as part of this project, which is within the overall orchard walking route area proposed here. Can we work together to expand on this? Surely with the right will, yes, we can. One last thing. I'm not opposed to the council aspirations for the enhanced river access of Roxburgh Crescent, simply against losing the current green space reserve to achieve that outcome. So I have asked before about the possibilities for both and rather than either or reserve area. There was a little discussion on that at your meeting in March, where the official land exchange proposal was first presented. In my written submission, I've mentioned this both and scenario again and asked that ways to achieve it be seriously considered as potential alternatives to the land exchange. I've even made some suggestions that, from the outside, seem worthy of investigation. Section 2.6 of the Summary of Submissions Memorandum, item 9 here today, notes 2 submissions suggesting the both and scenario, but there is no further specific mention of this in section 3, matters to be addressed in the final report. I'd like to suggest that while not in the literal brief of the exchange proposal, possibilities for a both and option merit serious consideration at this time. So I'm asking again now, dear Council, please seriously consider the various possibilities and opportunities of having both reserves and include these considerations in the deliberations report for councillors as mentioned in 6.1 of the above memorandum. And dear councillors, please seriously consider voting to retain the reserve. Thank you all for listening. I'm afraid I might not have left much time for questions, but I'm happy to discuss anything here with any of you in future.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Rosemary. We do have a question from Councillor Wood.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mission Rosemary. Thank you everyone for coming in today. Just one question, it's a bit left field, I don't expect you to answer for it now, but something to talk to your community about around the both and option is that there will potentially that will come at a cost to purchase the additional reserve space needed to do both retain the current reserve and provide that access to the river. And so the idea has been put that there could be an option for a special targeted rate to pay for that additional reserve space. I'd be interested in your community views on whether or not that would be something you'd be prepared to do, so that the city at large doesn't pay for a reserve that could be achieved through a land swap. So it's interesting to your opinion on what.
I'd have to go back to my community. I will not speak directly for my community. I did my bit for the petition in the community. I'll speak to that later, but I didn't ask them that question.
No problem, just something food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. There's no time for further questions. And you have another chance to speak, but did you still wish to take a minute?
I'd love to take a break to just
Yeah.
my mouth again, please, if I could.
So we'd love to welcome you back. But could I also just ask Cam, our Chief Financial Officer, just to receive your gift from the community gardens on behalf of the city. Thank you for gifting that, and we can sample that as council, but I understand also we'll be able to share it around.
Whatever you would like to do with it, I envisaged it either might end up in some sort of council common room or cafeteria, or would go to Just Zilch or some other similar organisation. Up to whatever you want to do with it. It's our gift from our gardens in our community.
Thank you. No, thank you. We will.
Okay.
One of the suggestions was that we would take what was left down to the youth space. I'm sure that'd be well received from our young people that connect in that facility.
Okay.
But thank you. That brings us to have an alternative to bring in Beth Lou, who is submission number 16 to speak on her submission.
My name is Beth Lou. First of all, I would like to clarify that when I made my submission, I was thinking that Waterloo Park was actually the name of the industrial area that was rezoned to be residential. And that rezoning, I think, was probably a really good decision. We need more housing. I don't live in the area. I'm not personally affected by the plans, which I understand is to rezone the green space to provide closer access and parking to the Manawatu River. What I would like to emphasize, however, is that whenever the council is approving new residential builds, I feel that sufficient green space needs to be provided so that the residents in these new areas, these new homes, would be able to have some sort of area to garden and provide for some of their own food. I think this is an essential measure that all developers need to take into consideration because of the current issues we're facing with climate change disruptions and the rising costs of food and transportation. So my request is that you please keep that green buffer zone as a community green space and add to it if possible. Please provide spaces for community gardens and fruit trees. I am involved in helping people without means or physical capacity to set up veggie gardens in their yards. I've been doing this for 3 years now. The number of people who want to provide homegrown veggies because they can't afford to buy them is rising daily. We have 2 or 3 families contacting us each week, hoping for assistance. We've got 25 families on a waiting list. With help from Manawatu Food Action Network, we help set up gardens for about 6 families a month, which is great, but it's not enough. So my request. My emphasis I want to make is that please make sure there is some space available for people to help them feed their families. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Beth. Is there any questions from members? It's just if you could indicate. Can I understand, you mentioned 25 families on the waiting list. Can I understand how many you currently provide for?
We've put in 90 gardens in the last 3 years. 30, yeah, about 25 of those were in the first 2 years. And then since Manawatu Food Action Network has been collaborating with us and got funding so that one person was hired so that she and I could put in gardens every Thursday. And since then, we've put in about 60 gardens, just since last September.
Wow, it's amazing work.
Yeah, but normally the waiting lists were at like maybe 4 or 5 people. Yeah, and it's 25.
There's another question from Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, guys. Are you aware of any community garden type facilities in the part of the city where this proposal is?
No, I'm not, yeah, I haven't gone to, I know that there's the Roslyn Commons, but I'm not even sure where that is.
Right, so that would be the closest one that you're aware of
Then
in
I'll-
this area.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, most of the people I work with, they don't have transportation easily accessible to them to get to a community garden. You know, that isn't within walking distance for them.
Great, thank you for those questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. There's no further questions. Thank you for presenting today and for your submission. Rosemary, can I call on you again to speak to your petition, retain the reserve?
Good afternoon again. I'm still Rosemary Watson and I still live at 27 Tilbury Avenue in Hokifitu. I coordinated the Retain the Reserve petition submitted as part of the public consultation on the Waterloo Park land exchange proposal. And I also ended up doing a lot of the collection of the nearly 220 signatures on the petition. At the March meeting, where I made a public comment, I was asked if there was local support other than from the immediately affected Tilbury Avenue residents for retaining the buffer strip reserve for possible community food production in the future. My basic answer was yes, among those in the nearby Tilbury Avenue Airplace community that I'd spoken to at that stage. As far as wider support in the local community, I was optimistic. It would just be a case of getting out there, walking and talking to people in the neighbourhood. This petition is the result of that walking and talking, much of which was done via door knocking in the immediate area concerned, nominally the same area that received the council letter on the land exchange proposal. Although you've received some information about the petition, I understand that for privacy reasons, you haven't seen the actual petition pages and the names and addresses thereon. Signatures were obtained from most homes in Tilbury Avenue and Air Place, and also from many in Waterloo Crescent, Dorset Crescent, Earl Place, Manawatu Street, Ruahine Street, Hiatua Street, and Harrow Place. Other signatures were from people accessing the river walkway via the Air Place car park, using Waterloo Park for recreation, and from the wider Hokifitu area. Further signatories include people from the Manawatu community gardening, food sharing and food resilience sector. I'd just like to remind you of the wording of the petition. We request that Palmerston North City Council decline the proposed land exchange as part of Waterloo Park Reserve. We believe that retention of the existing green space reserve area enables the opportunity to develop it as part of an accessible orchard-style community food production zone, which would provide a placemaking area and a new pedestrian route in the neighbourhood. That wording was chosen carefully. There is no guarantee of the future community orchard, as there will be more processes to follow and goals to meet in order to achieve that once the reserve land is retained. Similarly, there is no direct mention of the proposed new reserve at Roxburgh Crescent, as there is no opposition to that per se, only to the exchange of Waterloo Park land in order to obtain that reserve. Those points were reinforced when speaking to potential signatories. The petition focuses solely on retaining the existing reserve to hopefully use it in future for food and other benefits for the local community, including future residents of the Roxburgh Crescent housing area and the local Kaingapora redevelopments, especially those in Tilbury Avenue and Eyre Place. Whilst I can speak about the petition, I cannot, of course, speak directly for all those who signed it, apart from noting that their signatures obviously imply their support for its objectives. However, I would like to offer some personal reflections from my experiences of street walking to present the petition. Do you remember getting this letter from PNCC recently? Proved to be a reasonably useful conversation starter after, "Hello, I'm Rosemary from Tilbury Avenue. If I promise I'm not here to sell you anything, could I please have a few moments of your time?" But in several instances, there had been no letter received where the mail drop was supposed to have happened. And so at those houses, I ended up offering photocopies of the PNCC letter we personally received. And I later found out that some people on nearby streets outside the mail drop area had actually received the letter. I was humbled and pleasantly surprised by the amount of time that many people took to talk with me and understand the relevant issues, and the many who said, "Well done," or "Good on you," or similar, seeing an alternative to the council's exchange proposal and getting organised and out there to tell people about it and try and do good for the neighbourhood. I was also heartened by the amount of support I received for the petition stance. I estimate that over 90% of those I spoke with signed the petition. There were some offers of practical help and even a couple of potential financial or in-kind assistance for a future orchard. With more time and resources, I'm sure many more names could have been collected. Better weather, a sickness, fewer barking dogs and locked security gates might have helped too. I guess many of you can relate to that sort of thing from your own door-knocking campaign efforts. The visions of holding on to existing public green space and providing community food are definitely alive and well in the community. The potential loss of this relatively small reserve area is seen as part of a wider issue, the foreboding of an unwelcome future precedent. Whilst PNCC might see the land exchange as a convenient option to meet its aspirations, the local community view is of a different type of low-hanging fruit. I got invited into some houses to sit and spread out paperwork and was given tea and juice and offered other refreshments, and often spent time discussing a range of community and society issues, as well as the immediate Waterloo Park topic. A repeating theme was that it is sad that the general busyness of personal and family lives often gets in the way of getting to know more than just the immediate neighbours, unless there is an easy opportunity or a good reason for wider interaction. The goal of saving the reserve for the future possibility of a community orchard has provided that good reason. I now know many of my wider neighbours, at least a little, and I get people I never knew before waving and greeting me as I walk around the local area. It has been suggested to me that the petition, with its offering of an alternative to the original council proposal, has significantly increased the anticipated level of public engagement with the issue at hand. It has united people around a specific cause. If the petition on its own can do that, I urge you to consider just how much more the Hokofitu neighbourhood could literally come together through placemaking on some actual common ground, a future community orchard and a new pedestrian route at Waterloo Park. Please vote on behalf of that local neighbourhood to decline the proposed land exchange and retain the reserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. I'm opening it up to any questions from members. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rosemary, for both of your submissions. My question is very brief. In terms of the buffer zone, how many residential properties do you think are affected directly by the proposal?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Depends on how directly. I mean, there's one that it doesn't directly bound onto it, but has solar panels at an angle that if there was too much high building could well take out winter sun from solar panels. So I'm including that in that answer. It's a bit of a disincentive for anybody to maybe even consider installing solar panels if they haven't got them as well, not knowing that it's going to happen. So about 8 probably.
Okay, and just in respect of that, do you have any views just around setbacks that council might, so say for example, if this did go ahead, do you have any comment to make about what kind of setbacks or impositions that could be applied to ensure that the Dundas residents weren't affected unduly in terms of, say for example, loss of light?
I haven't done the magic science that the planners do with all those recession planes and things like that to be able to answer that in any degree of accuracy. But I would say that from what I understand, because it would be the backs of the new sections on the Roxburgh development that would bound up against our northern aspects, that according to what I have read, because it's the back of their sections, they can build to within a metre of that. And that, to me, is way too close to most people's homes when it's their main outlook, their sunny outlook, their whatever. So I can't answer it in specific scientific terms. I can just see it from living there and being in that space and trying to envisage what it would do to our environment.
That's very helpful. I was just hoping to perhaps, as a resident, just getting a view on that would be it's very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Rosemary. The time has expired. I appreciate your petition being tabled and spoken to. Thank you. That brings us on to Linda and Rowan Bell. Welcome, thank you.
Good afternoon, Councillor Dennison. Good afternoon, councillors. This is my submission to Palmerston North City Council regarding the proposed land exchange part of Waterloo Park. We want to retain Waterloo Park Reserve and to develop this green space as a walk-through orchard which will be available to everyone to enjoy. Meaning, reserve, to keep or order something, a particular person for special use. This theme, I think, is running through my head. The council says this area has a low level of recreation value to the community. Possible reason for this is that there is no direct public access to this area from Mulberry House. Only that from the Scout Den, their place, car park. We see a community garden which will benefit from the community. This would include the new Clang Aura housing project and also the new development at into industrial area. Pedestrian access to the reserve could be provided in the new development. I understand that planning or housing will be provided to 29 new homes on these two streets. In fact, our house, in fact, will be surrounded by them, and I welcome it. The increased population around this area will then double subsequently. There is a need for more green space, not less. The walk-through orchard provides not only organic food, but also creates a congenial community space and enhances the local environment. A green space for recreation and their families can relax and meet their neighbours. Therefore, I disagree with the description in the letter from Huntsville City Council 11th of April 2023, which describes the Waterloo Park Reserve as a buffer strip when it has such potential because of its orientation and proximity to all the homes, old and new, within easy reach. No industrial uses have poisoned the soil and should be left as such. Area for area, there is no land equity in the proposed land exchange. Keep the green space to be used by locals rather than exchanging it for car parks and concrete. Why are we losing our reserve? So that the new homeowners of Higgins development have parking and easier access to the river. This is a poor trade-off. I understand the improved river entrance is considered important to developers and council, and as a part of creating a usable area for public events. If the council want to create a car park for people from other parts of North to attend such events, then it should be accommodated within the new development. In keeping with the council's plan to plant more fruit and nut trees in the city, this could be added to by the current fruit tree planting next to the Scout Den, which are thriving. By the way, they were planted by the council. Surely, if the buffer strip of Waterloo Park Reserve had not been made, space for parking and river access would have been made in the initial plans. Please leave our green spaces alone. And if the developers and council want parking and another access to the river, then provide it within the current complex, but not by taking away green spaces to achieve it. I reiterate, please leave our precious green spaces alone. Once they are gone fair.
Thank you very much, Linda. I'll just open it up to members if there are any questions. There being none, thank you very much for a very clear and well-presented presentation. Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome up Adelia Stedler, submission number 31.
So, hello everybody. My name is Adelia Stedler, and along with my partner Rebecca Brown, who also put in a submission. We live at 23 Tilbury Avenue. So I think what's been said is incredibly articulate and covers so many of the factors that we potentially all have in common, the way we feel about it. My partner said something quite interesting, that she felt that the land exchange was on the counterpart or the developer's part disingenuous. And I think that's been the thing that's got me the most, is that this is not a fair land exchange. It takes far more than it gives. In my heart, I kind of feel that I don't know how the developers went about choosing how they put these homes on the site, but it looks like a kind of this is the easiest, quickest way to get as many properties on the piece of land. And I get that. We actually need houses. None of us are stupid about that. We know that. And I don't mind, and neither does my partner be mind. But these houses are coming, we welcome them, including the Victoria on the other side. But, you know, when we do this, we have to be really mindful, really thoughtful about the impact to the new residents and to the old residents about how the land is to be used. And is there enough? We live on waterway. If it floods, and it does from time to time. I walk dogs every day, so I often walk in my gumboots through the water that's pooled at the bottom of the stock bank. And a lot of people walk over that stock bank and look down on the land that we're talking about. They look down on it. If we had a garden of some sort and we had activities happening there, these people would no longer be looking down, they would be joining in. So I was one of the people that went out and got some of the signatures. And I was quite surprised that those that actually read it carefully asked me about this garden idea. And that the ones that had children were like, oh, we could bring them and we could learn about plants. We could learn about, my partner and I are really into plants. We do a lot of native planting on our own property. And this is something that we would love to expand on. I'm not eloquent in the way of the technicalities of it. I just feel that we're not giving due thought to the amount of people that will be living in this area. And that their needs also need to be considered. It's not just us. It's the people coming and their children and their dogs and their so on. Thank you very much for letting me share.
Great, thank you very much for your here. Some questions don't come through. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for coming to present to us today. Just wanted to ask about the native birds in the area. They're making nest in the actual trees
Yes.
in the reserve that would be
Yes,
chopped down.
we do. Yes, and I know that they were chopped down as that anyway, regardless, right? Those trees are coming down. That's what I've understood, that they're coming down.
Sorry, I can't answer your question. I'm not entirely sure, but I just
Right,
wanted
but
to
that's what I understood. So it would mean that we would lose them anyway, but we do currently have, I'm just trying to find the name of the moth that's there. My partner's, she's a vet. And more pork. Oh, yes, there's more pork, but I wanted to know the name of the moth. So I'm sorry, I can't find it easily, but we were out there the other day, last summer. Huge, beautiful creature. I was absolutely delighted to see this amazing creature against the bark, because it looks just like the bark. And we've grown natives out there, so there are lots of ways that animals and insects and biflora are coming into this area, which just looked like a rubbish dump when we moved into it. And it's like, not rubbish, but grass clippings and things, which was still there like that. But did I even answer your question?
I think you did. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please save it for us.
Thank you, Adelia. There's no further questions. Appreciate your speaking to your submission today. Members, there's no further speakers that are to speak to their written submission. So we're now going to move to the officer's summary report, summary of submissions, which is item 9, page 127 of our order paper, and welcome Karen Phillips, our activities manager for Parks, to present this report.
Good afternoon, Chair and councillors. I'll take the report as read. As you're probably aware with these reports, we're not in the position of responding to submissions. We wait to hear what people have to say in the hearings today, and the next report will address people's particular points raised. I have noted the submitter 30, I believe it was, or Rosemary's point that we'd like to see what the option of both being retained and developed would look like. So I'll add that, as she noted, to section 3 of the report and managed to address in the final report, so you can rest assured that will be done. Just as a quick highlight, 77% of the individual written submissions opposed the proposal to exchange, 20% in support of the balance neutral. As Rosemary's well documented, the petition, 218 people opposing the proposal. Table 1 assists you in identifying the number of particular points raised by submitters in opposition, to just give you a feel for the weighting of things raised. That, of course, doesn't incorporate particular points that submitters raised in hearings today that might be slightly different to points they raised in their written submissions, but gives you a good feel for the submissions. The next report, as I said, will address the matters raised with the final decision.
Thank you. We have some quick. Thank you, Aaron. If you have some questions, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Sarah. Just a couple of questions. The first one is about the petition. So, were you able to establish that the names and addresses on the petition were all local and that they were genuine?
That's not something I personally took. Just the Democracy and Governance Manager, that's done by the
We're just hearing that there are only individual names without no checking for the addresses.
Okay, thank you. The other question was around the comment that was made by one of the submitters that they received the letter informing them about the public meeting 3 days after the meeting itself. Are you able to comment on how much notice was given in the letters that were sent out prior to the meeting?
Unfortunately, I didn't include in the consultation summary the date that the drop was undertaken, but I can find that out. It was certainly prior to the meeting, and from memory, which is a little bit dangerous at this age. I thought it was in excess of a week in advance of the public meeting, but I will come back to you with that final report if you like. Yeah.
Because there isn't a mention of the public meeting in section 5, is there, in the consultation summary?
You're correct. That's my oversight in the report. My apologies.
Do we know how many people attended the meeting?
I don't have that at hand, but at rough, I do have some notes that I took at the time in the order of 15, I would suggest. Yeah.
And then the other comment that came through in submissions is that the letter drop perhaps wasn't entirely covering the affected area, but some people outside the area got letters. Are you able to comment on how the letter drop was done?
So I established an area for the letter drop in consultation with the communications team. So we mapped out an approximate 500 metre walking distance from the proposed land exchange, and then the comms team undertook the letter drop, and I understood that was to that area. I was slightly surprised to hear that some stepped outside of it, perhaps they went slightly beyond.
So, I suppose, how can we be sure that everybody in the area did get a letter, was aware of the public meeting in enough time to attend, has been able to be part of the consultation?
I can confirm the date that the drop was undertaken. I have to take their word that those doing the drop did it to the extent they proposed. I can check who undertook the drop personally, what individuals. I believe it was council officers. There's reason to doubt that they didn't do the job.
I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks. Aaron we're here just wanting to confirm my understanding of your earlier comment around the deliberations report coming to us. Here correctly, you indicated it would have information about a vote and options.
Yes.
And could you give us some sense of what sort of information you intend to bring forward?
What it might cost to provide the additional walkway connection that's been suggested in a number of the submissions to the end of what I've referred to as the buffer strip. What it might cost to put a walkway in what could be a variety of material choices, so the just a gravel path through to a concrete path, it's more suitable for active transport, and around past the scaffold, what it might cost to purchase the land of the proposed housing area rather than get the exchange completed as proposed. So I might hear those factors.
Thanks. So that sounds to me like we would be in a position receiving that report to make an informed decision around both an option if we were to desire to proceed in that way.
Council so chose that they might like to be thinking of that option would factor some design contingency, project management budgets for that as well. It's something they want to consider.
And do you need direction in this meeting to take it to that level, or would you be doing that in?
No. Bring it back to you.
Thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. No, thanks, Sarah. Along a similar vein, I just really want to confirm that the deliberations report would include how many properties are actually directly affected by the loss of the buffer strip, and perhaps some comment in terms of the mitigation that might be available to mitigate the impacts of diminished light, for example.
If committee is happy, I can provide a bit of an answer there now, having looked up the area of photography. As you asked that question earlier, there are 5 properties directly adjoining the area we're discussing. There are further 2 properties that, as the submitter alluded to, you might argue are affected. They are part of the property width away from the actual buffer strip, not directly adjoining it. So there's an argument that's 5 to 8 was a reasonable reply by the submitter. In terms of, sorry, the second part of your question, I think, was about
just what steps we might take to mitigate the, say, for example, the loss of light, loss of amenity.
So in the original proposal, as part of the broader structure planned area, Roxburgh as a residential area, we had explored options around slightly higher densities, multi-unit housing and the likes, and through engagement with a number of the adjacent property owners, broader community as well, as part of our medium density residential housing engagement. We are exploring other options as well in terms of how, particularly not just that edge, that residential edge, but also other residences along Ruahine Street might be best placed in terms of the level of density or height controls, setback areas proposed. We haven't gone back to the community with any revised provisions just yet. We're still working through the mechanics of that before doing another drop-in session prior to any formal notification next year.
So would that information be available for the deliberations report?
I would maybe able to make some initial commentary to support the deliberations report in terms of what options are currently being looked at.
Thank you. That's that will be helpful. Thanks to that, Chair.
Thank you, councillor Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I was just looking at your table at 2.2 there, the overall numbers of submissions. And I just wanted to clarify, I guess, that in this table, the petition is counted as 1.
Correct.
Excellent. So if I'm looking at the total number of oppositions, it's the 30 individual submissions received plus 218 from the petition, then minus any double ups.
Correct.
That's about right. Great. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aaron, I was just wondering if council's done any due diligence at all to date with the likes of soil samples and core samples with talks of contamination, and it had obviously crossed my mind. It's been industrial land for a long, long time. Is that something that's been done to date or will be done?
There's been soil samples done both on the buffer strip and the housing, including slightly around the towards the scaffold.
The buffer strip was suitable for food.
Yeah.
Nice one. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Upton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to actually follow up on councillor Arnott's question, goes really nicely onto mine. Who pays for the decontamination of land? Is it the current landowner or is it the council?
Sorry, councillor, that's outside my, just within the housing development area rather than within the reserve, which doesn't make.
So it won't be under 3.1.2, it's not going to be part of the report? Because you mentioned it.
So, contamination, there has been soil testing, as mentioned, within the reserve area. That's where it comes to the exchange, which will be part of my report back to you. But there isn't contamination that was concerned with production.
So if we did want to get it decontaminated, how do we find out? I mean, I'm asking a question of the officers, you know, who will pay for the decontamination if it is contaminated?
If there's contamination found within the land, it's within the buffer strip land, as I'm referring to it, and you chose to retain it and to see the community garden and develop, then council will pay for that. It's within council's land.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, councillor Arnott. You got another question?
Sorry for coming back in. Just sort of follows on again with recent subdivision down that way. Drums were found buried in the ground and obviously very historical. And yeah, obviously crossed my mind as well. There could be anything in Roxburgh present. So will core samples that go down a decent amount be part of this process? Or is it just soil and top level samples?
I'm not familiar enough with the exact sampling techniques, but I can.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions myself to complete the questions. Did I understand in responding to Councillor Hancock's query about setbacks and height, with some of the medium density being able to build 3 stories up to 11 metres? So is that unconfirmed that that's going to be part of the boundary design for the interface with the current residents? So is that confirmed or otherwise?
Well, we haven't communicated back to from our initial provisions that were drafted out and engaged on the initial drop-in session. Any changes just yet, we're still confirming servicing reports and the likes. So the current provisions as they stand had suggested not quite going the full length as far as medium density residential that's currently proposed in the broader zone, but had looked probably closer to the multi-unit housing areas that we've got. I can't quantify by a specific meterage off the top of my head out of my mind, but we are currently looking at, is that an appropriate treatment across the entire site, or is that more appropriate along edges where there may be a better outlook space across the river, for instance, versus at the residential edge where there might be heightened sensitivity to change in terms of what their current outlook is, like for instance this buffer strip, or for instance any of those other properties that are existing on Penny Street.
Thank you. As a completely separate question, I know the width of the current reserve that we're looking to exchange is being, there's advocacy there to retain it. Is there any consideration to keep it, but it may be in a smaller portion to sort of offset the purchase of the developments reserve, if that was the case? Is that being part of the consideration, or could it be?
No, councillor, that hasn't been considered to date. I haven't put any thought into it, but reluctant to reply off the top of my head. To think about it and get back to you.
Appreciate that. And one other aspect around the proximity to the other community gardens available in the city. Most would know around the Rosalind gardens that they have. Yeah, just wanted to when you bring another report forward, whether there could be some exploratory information, whether that is the next closest available or what others exist in those suburbs, just for balancing that out. So that was kind of a fair point raised by one of our submitters today. Last chance, members, are there any other questions before we close this off? Thank you to you both, Aaron and Keegan, for presenting that and responding to those questions. Members, I will now like to move the recommendations that are on page 7 of this item, which is that the committee receives the memorandum entitled Summary of Submissions for Waterloo Land Exchange Proposal presented to the Strategy and Finance Committee on the 1st of August. Seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open it up if there are any further comments. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just really want to just say thank you to the submitters who've come in to talk to us today. I think it's been a fairly good session in terms of, I guess, unpacking some of the concerns of the residents in the area. I'm looking forward to the various options as discussed through questions coming back in the deliberations report. And I guess my concern, sound really confident to make, is that I do have, obviously, I want to be well informed in terms of any adverse outcomes for the existing residents in terms of the proposed Rosswood present proposal. So those are my comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, David. No further questions, so I'd like to invite a vote. That is passed unanimously, 10 votes for and none against. I mentioned earlier that there was a possibility of having a submitter on the speed controls come in after this hearing. That is not confirmed, and so we don't have any more business today. So therefore, I'd like to just close with our karakia, ki kuta ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama, Whakamaua ka tina, huie, tahi. Sure. That concludes our item. Thank you.
We just want to say one thing.